The year was 1942. World War II was raging across Europe, and the world seemed to be under the shadow of fear. Cities were destroyed, families were broken, and people lived every day in worry. In this chaos, the Nazis were gaining power faster than anyone could stop them. Their armies moved like machines, precise and unstoppable. And one of their most dangerous weapons was the trains. Not ordinary trains, but massive iron monsters carrying tanks, guns, and soldiers straight to the front lines. Each train was a fortress on wheels, and nobody dared to stop them. In a small village not far from the tracks, life went on quietly, almost like the war didn't exist. People whispered stories about the terrible Nazi soldiers, but most were too scared to act. That's why when a young boy named Leo walked through the village streets, people barely noticed him. Leo was only 12 years old. He was smaller than most boys his age, with thin legs and a quiet voice. But what made him stand out the most were his glasses, large round spectacles that always slipped down his nose. He often pushed them up with his finger, squinting at the world in a way that made him seem curious, smart, and maybe a little strange. To the villagers, Leo seemed powerless. A small boy with glasses, he looked like he could barely lift a sack of potatoes, let alone challenge the mighty Nazi army. Adults often ignored him. Soldiers laughed at his size. Even other children thought he was just another quiet boy, lost in his own little world. But Leo was not as ordinary as he looked. Beneath those round glasses and timid appearance, there was a mind sharp as a razor. He saw things that others didn't. He noticed patterns, weak spots, and opportunities. And more importantly, he had courage that nobody expected from someone so small. That morning, the village was unusually quiet. Birds chirped nervously, and the wind whispered through the trees as if warning the people of something coming. Leo stood near the edge of the railway tracks, staring at the horizon. In the distance, a low rumble began, growing louder with every second. Smoke curled up from the faraway mountains. The villagers knew what that sound meant. The Nazis were sending their trains. Not one, not two, but 3 massive trains loaded with weapons heading straight for the front lines. Each train was longer than 100 men standing in a line, and each carried the power to destroy entire villages if it fell into the wrong hands. Leo's heart raced, but he did not run. He pushed his glasses up again, staring carefully at the tracks. He could hear the sound of metal wheels grinding on the rails, the whistle of the wind as the trains approached. It was terrifying. To anyone else, it seemed impossible that something could stop them. Even the bravest soldiers might have hesitated. But Leo did not hesitate. He had a plan, a strange and clever idea that no adult would ever think of. Nobody knew what Leo was thinking. His friends had never seen him act like this. Even his family watched from a distance, unsure whether to call him back or let him face the danger. There was something about Leo that morning that was different. His eyes behind the thick glasses were focused, sharp, and calculating. He wasn't afraid, not in the way most people were. He knew the world was counting on him even if they did not realize it. And then the impossible thought crossed the minds of anyone who might have seen him. What could a 12-year-old boy possibly do against 3 Nazi trains? It was madness. It was foolish. And yet, Leo moved like a shadow along the tracks, small steps, careful and quiet. He held something in his hands, something that no one could imagine being powerful enough to stop the trains. The villagers watched in silence, a mixture of fear and curiosity gripping them. No one thought he could do something so crazy, yet he did. As the first train came into view, the sun reflected off its iron body, glinting like 1,000 tiny daggers. Smoke poured from its chimney, and the sound of its engine was deafening. Leo adjusted his glasses one last time, his small hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the anticipation of what was about to happen. Every second mattered. Every movement counted. The trains were unstoppable machines, but Leo had something they did not expect. Something clever, something no soldier had ever predicted. And in that moment, the entire village held its breath. The ground seemed to shake under the weight of the approaching trains. Birds flew away in panic. The villagers whispered prayers, unsure whether to look or hide. And there, standing alone on the tracks, was Leo, the small boy with the round glasses, ready to do the unthinkable. The world was about to witness something extraordinary. Something that would be remembered forever. And all it took was 7 seconds. Leo was not like other children. At 12, most boys were running, playing, or dreaming about faraway places. But Leo spent his days observing the world. He watched the villagers, the soldiers, the birds, and even the trains that rumbled past his home. Everything fascinated him. To an outsider, he seemed quiet, almost invisible. But his mind worked like a machine, turning every small observation into a plan. He had a secret. While other children hid from danger, Leo had studied the Nazi trains for months. He watched the tracks, the engines, and the soldiers' routines. He knew when the trains left, how fast they moved, and how they reacted to obstacles. Most adults thought the boy was wasting his time, dreaming about impossibilities. They laughed when he mentioned weak points in the train defenses or unusual patterns in their movement. "You're too small to do anything," they would say. But Leo ignored them. He did not need their approval. He needed only one thing: courage and a clever mind. Leo's glasses were more than a tool for seeing. They were part of his genius. Through those lenses he saw details others missed. A loose bolt on the rail. A shadow where the soldiers didn't watch. A reflection of light that could signal the perfect moment to act. To Leo, his glasses were a weapon, a key to the impossible. He adjusted them constantly, squinting at the horizon, measuring every angle, every movement. That morning, the sky was pale, and the wind whispered through the village as if warning everyone about what was coming. Leo's eyes were fixed on the distant rails. The 3 Nazi trains were approaching, their iron wheels clanking like thunder across the countryside. Smoke curled in the sky, darkening the clouds. Each train was massive, longer than the entire village street, and everyone was packed with soldiers, weapons, and explosives. Anyone else would have run for safety, but not Leo. He stood tall, small hands clenched, mind racing. His plan was risky. Ridiculously risky. Impossible, some would say. But Leo did not hesitate. He knew that if he did nothing, the trains would pass and countless lives would be at risk. He had a solution, one that no adult had ever imagined. And it all involved his glasses, the simple round spectacles perched on his nose. The villagers noticed him standing alone near the tracks. Some tried to warn him. "Leo, it's too dangerous," they shouted. But he did not flinch. He only nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. It was a smile of confidence, not arrogance. A smile of someone who had thought everything through, someone who believed he could succeed where giants feared to act. Leo remembered the lessons his father had taught him. Not lessons of war, but of observation, courage, and creativity. "The world rewards those who see what others cannot," his father used to say. Leo believed this with all his heart. And now, with 3 unstoppable Nazi trains barreling down the tracks, it was time to put that belief to the ultimate test. As he adjusted his glasses for the last time, he crouched slightly, measuring distance, speed, and timing. His fingers traced the edge of the device he had built in secret. No one in the village knew he had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The device was small, strange, and unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was a mix of cleverness, physics, and sheer audacity. Most adults would have laughed at it. Most soldiers would have dismissed it. But Leo knew the truth. Sometimes the smallest things could do the biggest damage. The sound of the trains grew louder. Closer. The ground shook beneath his feet. Every villager who dared to peek from their windows felt the tension, the impossible scale of what was about to happen. And Leo? He remained calm. His heart beat fast, yes, but his mind was clear. Every second mattered. Every breath counted. Even the soldiers on the trains had no idea what was coming. They were confident, used to control and power. They had no idea that a small boy, armed with nothing but a pair of glasses and a clever mind, could outsmart them. They laughed among themselves, unaware that the rules of war were about to change in the blink of an eye. Leo's courage was quiet, almost invisible. But it was there, solid and unshakable. No one could see it, but everyone who watched would soon feel it. He adjusted his stance. He held his breath. And then, as the first train grew near, his mind calculated everything. The timing, the angle, the speed. Every detail had been considered. Every risk accounted for. And in that moment, the impossible began to feel possible. For a boy who looked weak, who seemed ordinary, Leo was about to do something extraordinary. Something that would shock everyone. Something that would be remembered long after the war. No one expected a 12-year-old to change the course of events. No one thought a small boy with glasses could stand against 3 mighty Nazi trains. But Leo was not just a boy. He was clever, brave, and unstoppable in the ways that mattered most. The villagers held their breath. The trains roared closer. And Leo, with his unusual plan, was ready to act. No one thought he could do something so crazy, yet he did. The trains were closer now. The earth trembled with every turn of their massive wheels. Smoke from the chimneys curled into the sky, dark and thick, warning the village of the destruction that could follow. Soldiers on the trains shouted orders, unaware of the small boy standing alone near the tracks. To them he was nothing, a tiny figure in glasses too small to matter. They did not know that sometimes, the smallest figures could make the largest difference. Leo crouched down near the edge of the tracks, hiding behind a small pile of rocks. His eyes, sharp behind the thick lenses, scanned every detail. The distance between the trains, the placement of the soldiers, the loose parts of the rails, he noticed it all. Every movement, every sound, every shadow mattered. For weeks he had watched, learned, and calculated. Now it was time to put that plan into action. His heart beat fast, but his hands were steady. He had practiced this moment in his mind countless times. In the quiet of his room, in the shadows of the barn, he had imagined the trains, the timing, and the perfect execution of his plan. Every detail had to be perfect. One mistake could be fatal. One wrong move and the trains would pass, unstoppable, carrying death and destruction with them. Leo held the small device he had built. It was nothing like a gun or a bomb, too simple for anyone to believe it could work. But it was clever, brilliant even, and it relied not on strength but on skill, observation, and timing. This was Leo's world, a world where brains could defeat brawn, where courage could outweigh fear. He adjusted the device carefully, making sure everything was in place. The wind rustled around him, the distant sound of the trains growing louder, as if time itself had slowed. He could hear the villagers whispering from a distance. Some prayed, some shook their heads in disbelief. No one moved too close. They all knew that Leo's plan was dangerous, almost impossible. And yet they also knew that if anyone could try, it was him. There was something different about Leo, something that made even the bravest of hearts hope. As the first train approached, Leo counted the seconds in his head. The rumble of the engines grew louder, the ground beneath him vibrating with each massive wheel. He adjusted his glasses one last time, squinting through the lenses to measure the perfect angle. Timing was everything. Too early and it would fail. Too late and it would be over. Every muscle in his small body tensed, ready for the precise moment. The first train was almost upon him. Leo's mind raced. He remembered every calculation, every observation he had made over the past weeks. The soldiers leaned out of the train, laughing and shouting, confident in their power. They could not see the boy's clever plan taking shape, hidden in plain sight. They could not imagine that a 12-year-old could change their fate in just a few seconds. Leo took a deep breath. His plan was simple yet daring. It required him to act quickly and perfectly. One wrong move and everything would be destroyed. But he trusted his mind, his eyes, and the strange device he had built. He moved silently like a shadow along the tracks, positioning himself with care. Every step was measured. Every motion precise. The second train was coming closer now, following the first like a shadow. The timing had to be perfect to affect all three trains. Leo adjusted the small levers on his device, making final checks. He looked at the horizon, counting the seconds until the first train passed his position. His small hands were steady, his mind sharp. There was no room for fear, no time for doubt. Only action mattered. He remembered the words his father had once told him, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it." Leo felt the fear, yes, but he also felt something stronger, determination. He would not let the trains pass. He would not let the soldiers win. The village, the people, and even the world needed him to try. The first train was nearly on him. The roar of its engine was deafening. Smoke stung his eyes. The ground shook violently. Yet Leo remained calm, every movement calculated. He crouched lower, adjusted the device, and waited for the perfect moment. Every second stretched into eternity. Every heartbeat sounded like a drum of war. And then, as the first train neared his position, Leo was ready. He had planned for this moment his entire life without anyone knowing. He had studied, practiced, and prepared for the impossible. And now, everything depended on a single action, a single movement. The success or failure of his plan would be decided in the next few seconds. Leo glanced at the approaching trains. His mind was clear. His hands were steady. His courage was unwavering. The impossible was about to begin. No one believed a 12-year-old could stop 3 Nazi trains. No one expected a small boy with glasses to challenge the mighty. But Leo knew something they didn't. Cleverness and courage could change everything. And in that moment, as the first train thundered toward him, the plan he had imagined for so long was about to come alive. The first train was almost upon him. Its massive iron wheels thundered along the tracks, sending vibrations through the earth that rattled the small stones around Leo's feet. Smoke poured from the chimney, black and thick, curling into the sky like a dark warning. The soldiers on board leaned out of the windows, shouting and laughing, confident in the power of their unstoppable machine. They did not notice the small figure crouched at the side of the tracks, a 12-year-old boy with round glasses and a clever plan. Leo's heart beat like a drum, steady and fast at the same time. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. He glanced quickly at the second and third trains in the distance, rolling toward the same path like shadows following the first. Timing had to be perfect. If he acted too early, the plan would fail. Too late, and the destruction would be uncontrollable. He adjusted his glasses again, squinting at the moving train. The sunlight reflected off its iron body, dazzling and blinding, but Leo's eyes were trained. He could see the loose bolts on the rails, the weak points where the train tracks could bend, and the small gaps in the soldier's watch. Everything was visible to him because he had observed it all before. Weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Weeks of quiet thinking, building, and testing in secret. Leo reached for the small device he had built. It was simple, almost too simple for anyone to believe it could stop a train. But he trusted it. He had tested its mechanics, calculated its effects, and planned the exact timing needed. With careful hands, he positioned it near the rail, making sure it was perfectly aligned. A single misstep could ruin everything. The first train grew closer. Its whistle echoed through the valley, loud and terrifying. Villagers who peeked from their windows held their breath. Some whispered prayers, while others shook their heads in disbelief. They could not understand how a small boy could even think of stopping such a massive machine. And yet they hoped. They had seen the determination in his eyes. They had felt the courage radiating from him. And they knew that Leo was different. Every muscle in Leo's small body was tense. He crouched low, blending with the rocks and grass beside the tracks. His glasses were adjusted just right. His hands were steady. And his mind was sharp, focusing only on the task at hand. The soldiers on the train laughed, unaware of the danger that awaited them. They had power, numbers, and steel, but they did not have the cleverness of a boy who had thought ahead of time. The first train passed dangerously close to Leo's position. He moved silently, making the final adjustments. The device was ready. Everything depended on precision, speed, and timing. He counted the seconds in his head, calculating the exact moment when the plan would take effect. His fingers hovered over the device, ready to act. The rumble of the second train grew louder in the distance. Leo could feel its vibrations through the ground. It was coming faster than anyone expected, following the first train like a shadow. If he could pull this off, both trains would be affected. And the third train? He had considered it in his calculations. Every detail was perfect. Every risk accounted for. Leo's mind was a calm storm. Outside, everything seemed chaotic. The trains, the soldiers, the smoke, the villagers watching in fear, but inside he was focused. Every detail of the plan unfolded in his thoughts like a clockwork mechanism. Timing, distance, speed, angle, all had to be just right. He adjusted the device one last time, holding his breath. Then he noticed something that made his heart beat faster. One of the soldiers on the first train had spotted him. The man squinted, pointing in his direction. "Look, a kid," he shouted, laughing. Others joined in, mocking the boy. They thought he was powerless. They thought he was nothing. And in that moment, Leo smiled slightly. They had no idea what was about to happen. A small flicker of movement from Leo's device caught the light. The reflection glanced off his glasses, but the soldiers did not notice. He had chosen the perfect moment. The timing, the angle, the placement, it all came together. This was the moment where cleverness could defeat brute force, where a small boy could stand against the unstoppable. The first train's wheels were almost directly above his position. Smoke stung his eyes. The rumble shook his small body. His fingers pressed down on the device. And then, something incredible began. A small spark of action started, almost invisible to the naked eye. But it was enough. Just enough. The plan, which seemed impossible to anyone else, had begun to work. The first train was affected. The soldiers screamed in confusion, unable to understand what was happening. The rumble of the engines changed. The massive wheels clanked differently on the tracks. Chaos was starting, but Leo's part was only beginning. He crouched lower, eyes wide behind his glasses, watching every detail. The first signs of success made his heart race. He had done everything correctly. But he could not stop now. The second train was coming, and the third would follow. Every second, every movement, every breath mattered. The villagers who dared to watch could hardly believe what they were seeing. A 12-year-old boy had started a chain of events that no adult could have imagined. Their hearts pounded. Their eyes widened. And Leo, quiet and focused, prepared for the next step. The impossible was in motion. No one thought a small boy could stop even one train. No one imagined that his cleverness could affect 3. But Leo was proving them wrong. And in the coming seconds, the chaos he had planned would become undeniable. The first train shuddered as Leo's device began to work. The soldiers screamed in confusion, banging on the windows, shouting orders, but nothing could stop what was happening. Smoke and sparks filled the air, and the massive iron machine slowed in a way that made everyone gasp. Leo's small hands adjusted the device slightly, careful not to make a mistake. Every tiny movement mattered. Every second was precious. The second train was approaching fast. Its whistle tore through the air, but Leo did not panic. He had prepared for this. Weeks of study, observation, and clever thinking had led to this moment. He bent low, making sure his glasses reflected the exact amount of sunlight needed to trigger the trick. The device was not a weapon in the usual sense. It did not explode or burn. It relied on cleverness, physics, and perfect timing, something no soldier could ever imagine. He squinted through his glasses, aligning the final angle. A small glint of light hit a tiny reflective part on the device, and a chain reaction began. The first train's wheels jumped slightly on the track, throwing the soldiers off balance. Panic spread quickly. The metal giant groaned and rattled as though alive, responding to the boy's precise movements. Leo's heart pounded in his chest, but his hands were steady, his mind razor-sharp. The soldiers tried to regain control. They shouted, fired their guns, and tried to hit the device, but it was too late. Leo had anticipated every movement, every reaction, every attempt they could make. And now it was working exactly as he had planned. The first train slowed, wobbled, and then started to tilt slightly, unable to continue on its normal path. Chaos had begun, and the boy with glasses was at the center of it. But Leo did not stop. The second train roared closer, its wheels clanging violently. Time seemed to stretch. Seconds felt like minutes. He adjusted the angle of his glasses one last time. Light reflected off them perfectly, hitting the second device he had positioned in secret. Sparks flew. The train shook violently, and the soldiers screamed in disbelief. They could not understand how a child so small could create this chaos. The villagers who dared to watch from a distance were frozen in awe and fear. Smoke, noise, and metal clashing filled the air. They whispered, unable to believe their eyes. And there, crouched beside the tracks, was Leo, the boy who looked too small to matter, the boy with glasses that now seemed more powerful than any weapon in the world. The third train was not far behind. Leo's mind raced. He had one more move. The final trick had to be perfect. The first two trains were already struggling, their engines groaning, their wheels clanging. Now the last train was approaching, faster than anything Leo had faced before. He adjusted his glasses, pushed them slightly up his nose, and focused on the final angle. The sun reflected perfectly off his lenses, hitting the small reflective device he had hidden near the rails. Sparks jumped, creating just the right amount of friction. The metal of the third train groaned, vibrating in a way that made even the soldiers on board feel the panic. Wheels rattled. Gears ground. The train slowed slightly, unsure of the path ahead. Leo's heart raced. He could see the fear in the soldiers' eyes. They shouted, but no order could stop the clever trick he had devised. Every movement he had imagined for weeks was unfolding perfectly. The impossible had become real. The three Nazi trains, unstoppable for anyone else, were now struggling because of one small boy with glasses and a clever mind. And then, in a moment that seemed to last forever, it happened. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and the first signs of complete chaos appeared. The trains began to derail slightly, swerving from their path in a way that Leo had calculated precisely. Soldiers were thrown off balance, engines rattled violently, and smoke filled the air. Villagers gasped. Nobody had ever imagined seeing anything like this. Leo crouched low, adjusting one last time. His glasses reflected sunlight perfectly, triggering the final reaction. The third train groaned and slowed, its wheels trembling as the chain reaction completed. Chaos ruled the rails, and the soldiers on board could do nothing but scream in disbelief. The boy with glasses stood quietly, watching the result of his clever plan. He was small, yes. He looked ordinary, yes. But in those moments he had done something extraordinary. He had taken down not one, not two, but three Nazi trains in a matter of seconds. And he had done it with nothing but courage, intelligence, and a pair of simple glasses. The villagers could hardly believe their eyes. They had seen the impossible. They had seen a small boy defeat machines that adults could not even dream of stopping. And Leo, quiet and focused, knew that his cleverness had made the difference. No one expected a 12-year-old boy to change the course of events in such a dramatic way. No one imagined that the smallest person could create chaos among the most powerful machines of war. But Leo had done it. And in the moments that followed, history would remember the boy with glasses who took down 3 Nazi trains in just 7 seconds. The rails shook violently as the first train wobbled and shuddered, sparks flying from the metal wheels. The massive iron giant groaned like a living creature in pain, tilting slightly as it struggled to stay on track. Soldiers screamed, shouting orders to each other, but their voices were drowned out by the roar of the engines and the clanging of twisted metal. Chaos had begun, and the boy with glasses stood at the center of it, calm and focused. Leo crouched low, his eyes sharp behind the thick lenses. His device had worked exactly as he had planned. The first train, caught off guard by the clever trick, started to derail slowly. Smoke filled the air, curling in thick black clouds, and sparks flew as metal scraped against the rails. The soldiers scrambled, trying to regain control, but they could do nothing. Every calculation Leo had made was proving true, every risk accounted for. The second train followed and the chaos spread. Its wheels rattled violently, its engine groaning as if it could sense the impending disaster. Soldiers shouted orders, firing guns in frustration, but the boy's clever device had already taken over. The rails bent slightly under the weight and speed, creating moments of imbalance that would only grow worse. Panic filled the cars. Men tumbled over one another as they tried to control the massive machine, but every effort was useless. The villagers, hidden behind walls and fences, could only watch in awe and fear. Smoke and sparks filled the sky, echoing the deafening noise of the struggling trains. They whispered prayers, hearts pounding, unable to believe what they were seeing. A 12-year-old boy, small and quiet, had managed to create chaos among the most powerful war machines they had ever seen. The third train, following close behind, now faced the same fate. Leo adjusted his glasses one last time, ensuring the light hit the final reflective part perfectly. Sparks flew as metal groaned, and the train shook violently. Soldiers tumbled over one another, yelling in confusion and panic. The engines rattled uncontrollably, unable to move in a straight line. Leo's clever calculations had taken control of the impossible, bending the might of steel and iron to his will. Smoke filled the valley, and the ground trembled as the trains lurched from side to side. The sound of screeching metal and crashing wheels echoed through the village. Windows rattled. Birds flew in panic. Even the wind seemed to carry the energy of the chaos. It was a storm of iron, fire, and noise, but at its center stood Leo, calm, small, and unstoppable in his courage. The soldiers shouted and fired guns, trying desperately to stop the disaster, but it was too late. Their power, their numbers, their weapons, none of it mattered. The boy with glasses had outsmarted them all. He had used cleverness instead of strength, timing instead of guns, and courage instead of fear. And now the trains were paying the price. Leo watched carefully, making sure each train was still on the path he had calculated. Sparks flew from the wheels, smoke curled into the air, and the sound of grinding metal filled the valley. Chaos was complete. The first train had slowed, the second rattled violently, and the third struggled to keep its course. Soldiers scrambled helplessly, unable to regain control. In the village, people whispered among themselves, awe written on their faces. How did a child do this? They asked. How could he be so clever? No one could believe it, and yet they had seen it with their own eyes. The small boy with glasses had turned the impossible into reality. He had taken down not one, not two, but 3 Nazi trains in just seconds, saving countless lives in the process. Leo crouched for a moment, catching his breath, eyes sharp behind his glasses. His device had worked perfectly. The trains were slowed, derailed slightly, and the soldiers were in panic. He had done what no adult could have done. He had turned courage, intelligence, and determination into a weapon more powerful than guns or tanks. The roar of the engines gradually subsided as the chaos unfolded fully. Sparks still flew from the twisted rails, smoke filled the sky, and soldiers scrambled in disbelief. The boy with glasses had accomplished what no one thought possible. The impossible had become reality in 7 seconds. For the villagers, for the soldiers, for the world, it was clear. Something extraordinary had happened. A small boy, seemingly powerless, had outsmarted 3 Nazi trains. He had created chaos where there had been order, confusion where there had been confidence. And he had done it with nothing but a clever mind, courage, and a pair of simple glasses. Leo straightened, pushing his glasses up with a small smile. The danger was not fully gone, but the immediate threat had been stopped. The trains had been slowed, derailed just enough, and the soldiers were too stunned to act. The boy had succeeded. He had taken on the impossible and won. No one expected it. No one believed it. But the 12-year-old boy had done what adults could not. And in that moment, the valley, the village, and the trains themselves seemed to acknowledge the extraordinary courage and cleverness of a single child. The world had changed in 7 seconds, and the boy with glasses had become a silent hero of the war, a legend in the making. The smoke began to settle over the railway tracks. The first train groaned, tilted slightly, and stopped in a twisted mess of metal. Sparks flickered from the rails, and the sound of clanging metal gradually faded. The second train had slowed dramatically, its wheels rattling and shaking. The third train, the last and fastest, was struggling to stay upright. Soldiers scrambled in confusion, shouting orders, waving their guns and panicking, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Chaos reigned where there had been order just moments before. Leo stood quietly, small and calm behind his glasses. He had watched every moment unfold exactly as he had imagined it. His device had worked perfectly. The trains had been slowed, derailed just enough to stop their mission, and the soldiers were powerless to recover. He felt a rush of relief mixed with pride, but also the weight of what he had just accomplished. The impossible had become real, and he was at the center of it. Villagers began to emerge from their hiding places, their eyes wide with awe. Mothers clutched their children, and men rubbed their eyes in disbelief. They had witnessed a 12-year-old boy do what no adult, no army could have imagined. "Did you see that?" whispered one man. "It was like magic," said a woman. "No, it was courage," another voice corrected. Every villager felt the weight of the moment. They had been saved by a child, by cleverness and bravery, not by soldiers or weapons. Some soldiers were frozen in fear. Others tried to organize themselves, but it was useless. Their trains, once unstoppable, were now a mess of twisted metal, sparks, and smoke. Orders shouted in panic went unheard. Confusion reigned among them. And in the center of it all, standing quietly, was Leo. A small boy with glasses, who had changed the course of events with nothing but intelligence, courage, and timing. Leo's family rushed to him, their faces filled with worry and relief. They had watched silently from the edge of the village, hearts pounding, unsure if he would succeed or fail. Now they could see that he had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. His father knelt beside him, eyes shining. "You've done what no one could ever do," he said softly. "You were brave, clever, and unstoppable." Leo smiled slightly, adjusting his glasses. He did not need praise. He had done it for the village, for the people, for the lives that would be saved. That was enough. Word of Leo's bravery spread quickly through the village and the surrounding areas. Stories began to circulate of the boy who had taken down 3 Nazi trains in 7 seconds. Everyone spoke in whispers at first, afraid that the enemy might hear, but soon the tales grew louder, more confident. Leo had become a hero, a symbol of courage and cleverness in a world that seemed consumed by fear. The soldiers, now completely disoriented, tried to retreat. Their confidence shattered, their power questioned. They had no choice but to abandon the area. The trains, once a symbol of unstoppable force, were now reminders of the brilliance of a child's mind. Every movement Leo had made, every calculation, every clever trick had worked. And the Nazis would remember this day as the day a boy stopped them. As the village slowly calmed, people gathered near the tracks to see the results. The twisted rails, smoking engines, and scattered sparks were proof of Leo's incredible feat. Children whispered excitedly among themselves, dreaming of what they could achieve if they had courage and cleverness like Leo. Adults shook their heads in disbelief, realizing that sometimes the smallest, quietest people could do the most extraordinary things. Leo stood quietly watching the trains. Smoke still rose from the engines, but the immediate danger had passed. He adjusted his glasses, took a deep breath, and felt a sense of quiet triumph. The world would move on, the war would continue, but this moment, this incredible 7 seconds, would never be forgotten. He had done what no one thought possible. He had used cleverness, courage, and a small device to stop 3 Nazi trains, saving countless lives. And as the villagers cheered quietly, Leo walked back toward them, small steps but a steady heart. He did not boast. He did not shout. He had proven that even the smallest person could create extraordinary change. Courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome power, fear, and destruction. The story of the boy with glasses would be told for generations. It was a story of courage, of cleverness, of hope in the darkest times. And for Leo, it was a reminder that even in a world filled with fear and destruction, a single person, no matter how small, could make a difference. No one had expected a 12-year-old to stop 3 Nazi trains in just 7 seconds. No one could imagine that a small boy, armed with nothing but courage and cleverness, could change the course of events. But Leo had done it. And the village, the world, and history itself would never forget the day the boy with glasses became a hero.